Alright, let's do a quick card review before Scholomance Academy. I already did a long, rambly card review of each card as they were being revealed, so this one I'm going to keep very concise, and I'm going to give everything a star rating. 1 is a card that I don't expect to see play, 2 is fringe playable, 3 is a card that I think will see play, and 4-star is a broken card that I think will see play. Now, this is more of like a prediction of what we'll see play and not necessarily like in a vacuum power level of a card. So a card can be pretty damn good, but if it doesn't have a home, it's going to get like a 1-star rating. All right, let's get into it. First up, Ace Hunter Kreen. If you hit just one thing, it's pretty solid, but then sometimes it like sticks to the board and your opponent can never come back on board, which is really insane. It's bad from behind, but so insane from ahead that I think it's got to be a 3-star. True M Crescent is a pretty solid card with some pretty decent synergies in Hunter, but I think it just competes with other weapons a little bit too much, so I don't expect it to see a ton of play. Demon Companion, 3 stars, is just a good solid 1-drop. Not as good on turn 1 as some others, but still maintains relevance later into the game. Blood Herald is going to be a 1-star, just takes too long to get big enough to be playable. Wolpertinger is quite good in various Hunter decks. I think it at least just slots into Highlander Hunter. You're pretty happy hitting it off Scavenger's Ingenuity, but it probably goes in other Hunter decks as well. Overwhelm I don't like that much. I think it's hard to have like a lot of beasts in play and something relevant to hit with this, and even to be playing a deck that has enough beasts in it. Bloated Python is a pretty solid death rattle, but it's a bit slow. I don't think it fits in Highlander Hunter, and I don't think the deck type, the archetype that's built around this, is going to be very competitive, so 1-star. Carrion Studies goes in the Death Rattle Hunter, but as I just said, I don't think that'll be very good, and even if it is good, I don't think Carrion Studies makes the cut. Krolusk Bark Stripper, strong card without a home. Highlander Hunter doesn't have the spells for it, and you don't really want it interfering with your Scavenger's Ingenuity. Professor Slate, another strong card without a home. There's no deck that wants to play like the twin spell thing, rapid fire, and even if you do play that, it's just like not enough synergy for Professor Slate. Shando Wildclaw, strong card without a home. It's just hard to play enough beasts for it, and just playing it for Dino Tamer Brand is not good enough. Adorable Infestation is an okay card. I'm skeptical that it'll slot into Highlander Hunter, but it's probably pretty solid in like Aggro Hunter, even if I'm not totally sure that that'll be a very good deck. Teacher's Pet is a reasonably strong card, but it interferes with Scavenger's Ingenuity, and again, no faith in Death Rattle Hunter. And Guardian Animals is a card that Hunter really just doesn't have the beasts to support. Moving on to Druid, again, Shando Wildclaw, there's just not a deck that plays enough beasts for it. Adorable Infestation, I'm actually going to bump up to 3-star in Druid because I think it fits really nicely in the Gibberling Druid. Teacher's Pet and Guardian Animals both get quite a lot better in Druid, 3 stars and 4 stars respectively. You can ramp into Guardian Animals, you can do Kel'Thuzad stuff, it's just really solid. And Teacher's Pet, I mean, we need enough animals for our Guardian Animals. And along with that, we're obviously playing Twilight Runner, insane card, 4 stars. It's kind of what makes the Guardian Animals deck playable, and even like in Big and Druid it might sneak its way into. I think this deck is also playing Survival of the Fittest, so 3 stars on Survival of the Fittest. I'm not 100% sure that the Guardian Animals deck plays this, but I think it does, because that deck wants to play like Kel'Thuzad anyway, and Kel'Thuzad with this is absolutely insane. Forest Warden Omu. At the low end, it's like an Arcane Tyrant. At the high end, it lets you have a 30-mana Malygos turn, so pretty damn good card. Not 100% sure it'll find a home, but it's so flexible it has to. Nature Studies is an insane card. It helps you find your really relevant game swingy like ramp spells or embiggen or whatever like that, whatever that kind of stuff. And it just has spell synergy for like Exotic Mount Seller and Gibberling. Really just an insane card. Next is Gibberling. I think there's going to be an aggro deck built around this, and I think it's going to be pretty freaking good, because it turns out Violet Teacher for 1 mana is a strong card. and Druid absolutely has the spells to support it. Partner Assignment is kind of a sketchy card, but I think it goes exactly in the Gibberling deck, so 3 stars. Lightning Bloom is insane, just allows for so many tempo swings and cheating out things like Guardian Animals, good with Kel'Thuzad, just a very insane card. Speaker Gidra is a strong card, but I couldn't find a home for it. But I think it's a strong enough card that I have to at least give it 2 stars, because it could pretty easily like sneak its way in as the 30th best card in a good Druid deck or something. Groundskeeper, I'm only going to give a 1 star. Powerful card, but I think Druid is just doing more broken stuff than playing this. And Runic Carvings, also just like a solid kind of flexible AoE thing that can be played proactively, but I don't think good Druid decks have room for it. Moving on to Shaman, Lightning Bloom is still insane. It just lets you cheat out like 5 and 6 drops. It's much more just like an aggressive tempo card in Shaman than it is in Druid. Speaker Gidra, very similarly, I couldn't find a home for it, but it's good enough that I think it might be like the 30th best card in some deck. Groundskeeper, I'm going to bump up to a 2 star in Shaman, because I think there will probably be like a tier 3 Highlander Shaman kind of thing, and Groundskeeper's probably pretty good in that deck. Runic Carvings we're going to bump up to a 3 star, and I guess we'll go ahead and say Totem Goliath has 3 stars as well. I think these fit nicely into Totem Shaman. I think they're enabled pretty well by Lightning Bloom, and now Totem Shaman I think just has so much stuff that eventually your opponent's not going to be able to deal with it, and you just murder them. Next we have Rune Dagger, very solid weapon, but I don't have that much faith in Spell Damage Shaman. Still, I gave this a 2 because if Spell Damage Shaman is like a tier 3 deck, this is the glue that's holding that deck together. And I think this might also just be like fine in Control Shaman. Molten Blast, as I said, I don't have that much faith in Spell Damage Shaman, and I'm actually not quite sure this is powerful enough in Spell Damage Shaman, because without Spell Damage it's just so weak. Now, Diligent Note Taker is a very insane card. I think it goes in like every Shaman deck. In Control, you get back nice control cards. You can do some cheaty stuff with Lightning Bloom. In Totem Shaman, you get to copy your Totemic Surge and Totemic Might. Just a very, very strong card. And, you know, solid on curve too. Instructor Fireheart, another just very solid card. I think you put it in every Shaman deck. It's good. Pretty much any turn you can play it. I don't know. Not much to say about it. It's just insane. Tidal Wave probably just doesn't do enough damage for an 8-mana AoE. Trick Totem I think sees play in Shaman exactly because it's a 2-mana totem. Sometimes it lives for Totemic Reflection, and that's pretty good. Devolving Missiles is a really solid card. I didn't quite find a home for it in Shaman, but if there's like a Highlander Control Shaman, like I said with Groundskeeper, maybe tier 3, this probably goes in it. Or depending on the meta, this could even go in an aggressive Shaman to clear some taunts. Ras Frost Whisper is just a very good card. I think you start by putting it in like every Shaman deck. Some of them, like Totem Shaman, maybe it doesn't make the final cut, but you at least try it in every Shaman deck. Primordial Studies, there is some spell damage Shaman stuff, but I don't have that much faith in it. And, like, I don't know, there's just not that much additional synergy with this card. Moving on to Mage, Trick Totem gets demoted to a 1 star for this class because there's no totem synergy, and it's just too high variance, too low impact as a 2-drop. Devolving Missiles we're going to bump up because I definitely want to put a copy of this in Highlander Mage, and maybe some Sorcerer's Apprentice decks as well. Ras is still about as good in Mage, maybe slightly better, because I think the spell damage stuff is a little bit better in Mage. Speaking of which, we're going to bump Primordial Studies up to 3. I think you play this in Cyclone Mage, particularly because you want to enable, or because you want to enable like a couple of these next cards. Lab Partner, Dire Mole with Upside, I think you play it in Cyclone Mage. It's good with Primordial Studies because you get like a 0-mana spell damage thing, quite good. It also enables Cram Session. They both enable Cram Session, which I think you play in Cyclone Mage. Mozaki, Master Duelist, I think is very insane. It's like a win condition in Cyclone Mage, but it's a win condition that you don't have to play as a win condition, just slam it on turn 5 because it's a 3/8. And even if it dies, Cyclone Mage still just has like several other ways to win the game. So really insane card, I think. And sometimes you draw like 8 off Cram Session. Firebrand, just another very solid mage card. I think this goes into Highlander Mage with Devolving Missiles and a couple other 1-cost spells, and it's also just good in Cyclone Mage, maybe Tempo Mage as well. Combustion, solid spell. Shadow Bolt and Power Shot both kind of suck, but it turns out when you put them in the same card, it's quite good. Wormweaver, probably just too slow for Tempo Mage, if Tempo Mage even exists. Brain Freeze, probably just a bit too low impacts to put in the deck, and it's actually kind of hard to combo a lot of times that you'd want to play this in Mage. Potion of Illusion, I'm going to give 2 stars to. There are some OTK things with it. I think you probably don't need to be doing those OTK things in Mage, because you can just do like Cyclone Mage, Mozaki stuff instead. But people will play it, it'll have a presence even if it's not that good. And, you know, maybe it's the best way to play Mage. Jandis, just a very efficient pile of stats. You probably try it out in most Mage decks. It at least makes the cut in Highlander Mage, I think. Wand Thief is a little bit sketchy. I didn't want to put this in Cyclone Mage, but maybe it's good in there. I didn't want to put it in Highlander Mage, but maybe it's the 30th best card in there. It's just like a good enough card that it might see play, but I didn't find a home for it. Brain Freeze, again, a little bit too low impact, and Rogue has Backstab. Potion of Illusion I'm going to demote to 1 star in Rogue because I don't even see any Antonitis OTK nonsense with it. Jandis I think is going to be better in Rogue than Mage because Rogue is better with the tempo, plus they can do like Witchy Lackey Shadow Step stuff, which is just good. Wand Thief is also getting promoted to 3 stars because it's a very good Vendetta activator, and I think Vendetta Rogue, or Vendetta, might be the package that goes in Galakron Rogue this expansion. Secret Passage, easy 4 stars, 1 mana draw 5. This is the reason to play a Rogue deck that's not Galakron, and I think it's just like super busted. You might even play it in Galakron Rogue, because for some reason the turn you play this, if you draw cards, those cards you drew don't get shuffled back into your deck, which makes no sense to me, but yeah, very strong card. Infiltrator Lillian, another card that's just pretty good. I think you start out by putting it in every Rogue deck, probably makes the cut in most of them. Plus it has Stealth Synergy, which is relevant in Rogue. Next up we have Self-Sharpening Sword, which I'm actually going to say is 1 star. I don't like this nearly as much as other people seem to, because when I play this on 3 it does 1 damage, which seems really shitty. And then the following turn it only does 2 damage, which still seems kinda shitty. So I mostly think that weapon decks would prefer to just play Hooked Scimitar or Waggle Pick, but I could be wrong about that since that does not seem to be the popular opinion on this card. Volparatoxin Blade is pretty solid, but I felt like it was maybe kind of slow for my Secret Passage deck, and I felt it didn't really make the cut in my Galakron Rogue, so I'm going to give it 2 stars, because I think it might be one of the worst cards in either of those 2 archetypes, but it didn't quite make the cut for me. Shifty Sophomore is going to just be too slow of a card. Plagiarize is just a shitty value thing in a class that doesn't struggle with value. And next up we have Cutting Class. I actually think this card is insane, but it seems like most people don't like it that much. I think you're playing this in your Secret Passage Rogue with like Hooked Scimitar and Waggle Pick and Deadly Poison. And I think it's going to be 1 or 0 mana draw 2 pretty often, and that seems insane to me. Maybe this deck has too much card draw and Cutting Class is probably the worst card draw in the deck, but I don't know, I think it's good. Maybe I'm crazy. Steel Dancer could fit in that deck, but I think it's going to be too slow, so 1 star. Similar with Krastanov, it's powerful in the Hooked Scimitar Waggle Pick deck, but I think we're just really trying to murder people with Secret Passage. And finally we have Coerce, which is an okay card. It's going to compete with Sap, and it's not super clear which one is better. Sometimes Coerce will be better, but I think Sap usually will be. Moving on to Warrior, these 3 weapon cards I'm going to give basically the same evaluation to. Cutting Class, just insane card draw, but I think Steel Dancer and Krastanov are going to be too slow for the Pirate Warrior or whatever weapon warrior. Coerce, I'm going to downgrade to 1-star in Warrior. I don't think it'll see any play. I think it's just, like, Execute is already not that good. And the upside on this, I think Warrior decks that, like, if it's hard to execute, I think it's probably going to be kind of hard to combo as well. So I don't love Coerce. Plus there has to be a home for it, which I'm not sure there will be. Next we have Reaper's Scythe. I think Reaper's Scythe is just a good card. You probably play this in the Cutting class deck just because it's a 4-mana 4/2 weapon, and sometimes it's active. I also think Control Warrior can play this card because it's just an insane weapon, and you can draw it consistently off Corsair Cache. Playmaker is going to just be too sketchy of a card. It's too slow to combo with, too shitty to play for tempo. Information is a shitty value card. Athletic Studies is a shitty value card, and there's no rush stuff that I want to ramp into. Troublemaker is a very strong card, comparable to like Ragnaros or Priestess of Fury, but maybe better than either of those. The only struggle with this card is maybe it's too slow for Enraged Warrior, but I think Enraged Warrior at least tries it. I think Control Warrior absolutely plays this, and if there's a big warrior, like this card might be the reason that Big Warrior is playable, even though I don't think it will be. Rattlegore, like I said, I don't think Big Warrior will be playable. This is way too slow for anything else. And I'm not even 100% that this sees play in Big Warrior, because it's still just like pretty damn slow. Although if the game is slow enough that you can play Big Warrior, this is probably fine. Commencement goes in Big Warrior, but as I said, I don't have faith in that. Ceremonial Maul, I think just has too much competition from better weapons. Shield of Honor is a very strong card, comparable to or better than Rampage in Enraged Warrior. Makes your Bloodsworn Mercenary combos cheaper, so probably quite good in that deck. And Lord Barov is insane in Warrior because you have Risky Skipper, and then you also have like Whirlwind and stuff. But yeah, equality in a Whirlwind class is pretty insane. Moving on to Paladin, I don't think Dual Paladin is going to be any good, so Commencement still sucks, I think. Ceremonial Maul still competes with better weapons, and there's still just not really a home for it. Shield of Honor gets demoted to a 1-star because Paladin never has damaged minions. And Lord Barov I'm actually also going to demote to a 1-star, because I think the only viable Paladin decks are going to be really tempo-based and really proactive, and this effect just doesn't fit. Plus it's not like super easy for Paladin to clear the board with this. Very, very strong card that'll probably be 4-star in Paladin at some point, but I just don't think this expansion it's going to be that good. To rally on the Tenured, I think this card's a bit underrated, but still probably won't see too much play. There's just not room in pure Paladin for it. Judicious Jr. is not big enough to duel with, but still too slow to actually play from your hand. Blessing of Authority is a strong card, but I couldn't quite work it into my pure Paladin. It might be playable there, but I think it's just not quite a top 30 card in that deck. Argent Braggart I struggled with a bit, and for a long time I wanted to give it a low rating, but I think it's just too good at making tempo swings in pure Paladin. And like I think pure Paladin shifts the way it plays because of this card. You shift away from like value stuff like Lightforged Crusader, and you just want to play like this with a Libram of Hope and make a couple 8/8s. So yeah, I think this card ends up being pretty good in pure Paladin. Goody 2 Shields is just a good 3-drop. You probably play it in every Paladin deck, including pure Paladin. First Day of School is just better than Firefly usually. You probably play it in every Paladin deck, including pure Paladin. High Abbess Allura is a pretty good card. I think it will see play in pure Paladin, but I'm not sure that it's good enough that I want to stop playing like Consecration and commit to playing like Blessing of Authority, but I still think it's pretty solid. Now, Devout Pupil I think is insane in pure Paladin. You play a lot of buff stuff, particularly Libram of Wisdom, which makes this cost 0 mana very consistently, and it's more Argent Braggart synergy. Gift of Luminance I think is just kind of a weak card in Paladin. I don't really know what I want to be targeting with it. And Wave of Apathy I think is just too low impact of a card. Now moving on to Priest, High Abbess, Allura, and Devout Pupil, both of those are going to get downgraded to 2 stars, because I don't think Priest does the buff thing as well as Paladin. I think Buff Priest will probably be a fringe deck. It'll probably be like playable, but not great. And these are like 2 of the best cards in that deck, but I don't think it's a great deck. Gift of Luminance, I'm still not excited about. I think it's a bit redundant with like Grave Rune and stuff like that. But it is probably more playable than Priest than Paladin. And Wave of Apathy I still think is too low impact to see play. Now Cabal Acolyte you can play with Wave of Apathy, but it's a really situational card, and most of the time it's hard to like have a relevant thing to cast a spell on and have something relevant to steal with this. So I think it's just a bit sketchy. I don't think it's very good. Frazzled Freshman, and I guess Power Word Feast as well. These go in the Buff Priest with Allura and Devout Pupil. As I said, I don't think that deck will be great, but it'll probably be somewhat playable. Mind Render Lucia is probably like the most insane, stupidly designed card in the set, because it just means that Priest never loses to combo decks again, which is really insane because Priest already has a Galakron that means it usually just wins control matchups. So then you just dedicate your other 28 cards to beating aggro, and it feels like you just beat almost everything. Maybe you don't beat Highlander Hunter though, but still an insane card. And it's like good in aggro priests too, just as a reload. So insane. Initiation I think is just too inefficient of a card, and Priest doesn't manipulate the damage on it very well. Draconic Studies is just a dumb value thing. Priest does that better with other stuff, and there's no dragons I want to ramp into. Flesh Giant is a very solid card that I think just doesn't fit Priest's game plan, because they're not really chaining threats. This is good if you're just like threat. Priest just kind of like clears the board and chills for a bit. Plus I don't think it's super easy to discount in Priest. Similarly, Brittlebone Destroyer I don't think is a great Priest card. It's a little bit hard to enable, and Priest can just play like Shadow or Death or whatever instead of this. Raise Dead is like a pretty good value card, but I think Priest just does value better than this, and I couldn't quite find a home for it, but it's certainly a strong enough card that I could just be absolutely wrong about it. And finally, Disciplinarian Gambling. Insane card that Priest does not have the support to play, so 1 star I'm gonna say. Even their aggro decks are usually like buff things and decently statted minions that you don't want to destroy. Now moving on to Warlock, I think Flesh Giant is quite a bit better. They have like Soul Fragment stuff to enable it, plus they just have more activators for it in general I would say. And it might, in Warlock, might even make the cut in like Zoo or something. Or maybe you just stick to control decks, and this might be the card that brings Handlock back, so I think it's pretty nice. Brittlebone Destroyer also is better in Warlock, but I'm not as enthusiastic about it. I still think it's a little bit hard to activate since it costs 4 mana itself. I played it in like Handlock, but I'm not 100% sure that it... Like, I feel like it's the worst card in the Handlock deck that I made. Raise Dead, definitely a better card in Warlock, I would say. It's pretty damn good in Zoo, just because, you know, you get more little shitters you can play again, and it's good with like Dark Glare and stuff like that. And just because like Flesh Giant and Brittlebone Destroyer are better in Warlock, Raise Dead becomes a better card. Disciplinarian Gambling, way better in Warlock than it is in Priest. You absolutely just slam this in every Zoo deck. If you play this on 3 or 4 and it lives, you instantly win the game. And for some reason it's a 4 mana 3/6, so it probably lives pretty often. As insane as Gambling is, I don't think you need to play Bone Web Egg in your deck to enable it. I think the Bone Web Egg in general just doesn't have enough synergy and support to be playable right now, although it is a strong card. Archwitch Willow definitely just doesn't have enough support, and it has some actual anti-synergy with some of the smaller demons like Moarg Artificer. Demonic Studies is just a dumb value thing, and there's no demons I want to ramp into, and most of the demons you're discovering are shitty anyway. School Spirits is Volcanic Potion with Upside. Sounds like a good card. Might even see play outside of Soul Fragment decks, but probably not with Rain of Fire, or Dark Skies, I should say, in Standard. Void Drinker, very solid payoff card for Soul Fragment Warlock. Just a big dumb idiot, which Warlock appreciates, maybe even in an aggro deck. Shadowlight Scholar, just another solid payoff card, good for board control, good for murdering the opponent. Not much bad to say about it. Soul Shear, if you want to shuffle some soul fragments into your deck, seems like it does it pretty well. Spirit Jailer, I think is just really insane. Like, obviously, if you're playing a soul fragment deck, like, if you want to play an aggressive soul fragment deck, this is good. If you want to play a defensive soul fragment deck, it's still good. And it's also just a 1-mana 1/3 demon, so this might just be good in Zoo, even without soul fragment stuff. Just a really insane enabler that has applications outside of the archetype. Sociologist Militia, I think, is pretty good in Warlock. All the other soul fragment cards are pretty good, so you might as well just jam this in too. And finally, Philosophy. Not a card I'm too excited about. I feel like even if you're playing a Zoo deck with a bunch of demons, the outcast on this is pretty awkward, especially in like a Hand of Gul'dan deck. So, sketchy card, I would say. Now, moving on to Demon Hunter, let's take a look at these Soul Fragment cards again. I think Soul Shear is a lot worse than Demon Hunter because I think Demon Hunter's Soul Fragment deck is going to be more aggressive. But you might still play like a copy of this just for more consistency to activate your stuff. Spirit Jailer, I'm also going to demote by 1 star. Because I think there's exactly 1 Demon Hunter Soul Fragment deck compared to Warlock, which could have like maybe 2. And I don't think this makes the cut in non-Soul Fragment Demon Hunters anymore, but still a good card in these Soul Fragment decks. Sociologist Militia, I think is going to be too slow for Soul Fragment Demon Hunter, so it demoted to 1. And Philosophy mostly still just sucks. Marrow Slicer, very solid Soul Fragment card, and might see play outside of Soul Fragment decks because it's a 4-mana 4/2 weapon. Soul Shard Lapidary is an insane payoff card. This is why we want to be playing Soul Fragments in Demon Hunter. I think we just play 2 of these, 2 Marrow Slicer, 2 Spirit Jailer, and I think we're pretty happy with that. Shard Shatter Mystic, another insane payoff card, but I think it doesn't fit the archetype of Demon Hunter that wants to play Soul Shard stuff, Soul Fragment stuff. Cycle of Hatred, the big shitty AoE, I feel like I'd rather just play Chaos Nova. Ancient Void Hound, big Demon Hunter's not a thing, and even if it was, this card is kind of slow and shitty. Glide, I am just not a believer in Glide, 1 star. I think just like Skull of Gul'dan, Voracious Reader, even like Spectral Sight and Crimson Sigil Runner, I think Demon Hunter just has better card draw than this, and I think the disruption on it is very overrated. Fully prepared for this card to get nerfed on day 2 and look like an idiot though. Star Student Selena, powerful effect, but outcasting it is hard, and it's a 4-mana 4/3, so I'm going to pass on that card. Double Jump can draw some pretty good outcast cards, including Glide, but I think Demon Hunter has better draw than Double Jump. Mage is a solid silence, but I have a hard time imagining it being better than Consume Magic, so 1 star. Vile Fiend Trainer, another solid card, but I think Demon Hunter just has better options, including Illidari Fellblade, which already doesn't see any play. Next we have Fell Guardians. I think it's just a little bit too hard to discount this, and holy shit is it a bad top deck, which is particularly relevant because Demon Hunter has so much card draw. And I think all these Hunter dual class cards all get the same evaluation. Ace Hunter Kreen is just a good card. If it gets 1 trade, it's fine, and sometimes it sticks and just wins the game. Truing Crescent has good synergies, it's a solid weapon, but it conflicts mostly with Umberwing, which is pretty awkward. Demon Companion is just a good 1-drop, and Blood Herald takes too long to get big. Probably even shittier in Demon Hunter because you want to outcast some other stuff. Moving on to neutrals, we have Demon Wisp, which is probably just not good enough. I didn't find a deck that wanted to play this, even the Gambling deck, I didn't like it that much. Animated Broomstick, I think, is just too low impact of a card. A lot of times it just doesn't really do anything. Intrepid Initiate, a card I've seen getting a lot of praise, but I think it's mostly just not better than Blazing Battle Mage. and I think the decks where I would want both are pretty few and far between, but it's competitive enough and open-ended enough that I didn't feel I could give it 1 star. Pinflinger, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, although it is a cute card. Tour Guide, absolutely insane. It's at its best in Totem Shaman because it enables your totem stuff, your totemic reflection so consistently. But it's also just a good bootleg Kobold Librarian and Warlock. It's pretty good as like a Lost in the Jungle and Paladin. It's just a good card in a lot of classes, but it's 100% good in Warlock and Shaman. Mana Feeder Panthara I think is just a good Demon Hunter card because their hero power costs 1. Maybe it goes in some Tour Guide decks as well, maybe Quest Shaman, but at least Demon Hunter, so solid enough. Sneaky Delinquent I think is just an upgrade on Skyvatir in Stealth Rogue, and maybe it sees play in like Face Hunter or something as well. Wandmaker I actually think is pretty solid. Cobalt Spellkin is a playable card, and Wandmaker I think is more efficient than that. I think maybe Demon Hunter could play this card in like a Voracious Reader deck. I think various Voracious Reader decks could maybe play this. I liked it in Gibberling Druid. Maybe Highlander decks look at this. I think it's a solid card. Crimson Hothead, the best I could find for this was activating Breath of Dreams and Druid, but even then I didn't really feel like it made the cut. Divine Rager is shitty. Fishy Flyer just costs too much mana to get all the value out of it, I think. Maybe Murloc decks are interested in it, but even then it's pretty expensive. Wretched Tutor I think is a pretty solid neutral AoE. I didn't quite find a home for it. I thought about playing it in my in like a Kel'Thuzad Druid deck, but Druid is just so broken I don't think it makes the cut. It probably sees play somewhere though, I would have to guess. Lake Thresher, I'm actually going to give 3 stars to Lake Thresher. I've seen a lot of people say, like, the only place this ever sees play is if you have to play a copy in Guardian Animals Druid. And I think that is the only deck that plays this, but I think I'm pretty happy to play it in that deck. I think it might just be better than, like, Teacher's Pet, because you spend your time doing nothing and ramping, and then you can just, like, pull this out and get the board back. I think I like this quite a bit in that deck, but no other deck. I don't ever want to be spending 5 mana to play this. Ogremancer is just not great. Your opponent can mostly just ignore it or just kill it. Steward of Scrolls seems kind of shitty considering that Big Ol' Whelp only sees play for Dragon Synergy. Onyx Mage Scribe is too expensive to have to invest more mana into getting the effect out of it. Smug Senior just costs too much mana to play both halves, although it is a lot of value in one card. Sorcerer's Substitute, 6 mana 12/12 is very strong, but I think it's going to be too hard to activate. The only place I could see it seeing play is with Rune Dagger and Shaman, and even there I wasn't too excited about it. Plagued Proto-Drake is a big slow idiot. If you're trying to cheat something like this out, I think Scrapyard Colossus is just better. And I'm never actually paying 8 mana for this. Cult Neophyte is like a fine tech card to dodge AoE in a zoo type deck, but I just think all the aggro decks right now are so synergy based, I think you just never have room to play this card. Voracious Reader, possibly the best card in the set. Jeeves for half as much mana and it doesn't help your opponent. I think every class is going to try playing this, and it's probably going to stick in multiple classes and be just insane. Robes of Protection, actually very similar to the Cult Neophyte. Strong effect, I could see it seeing play in some metas, but I think right now, there's just no room to actually squeeze this into a deck. Transfer Student we know is a good card. I think just based on the power level of this expansion, it'll probably fall off a bit, but it probably like sneaks its way into Highlander decks still. Educated Elec, usually shuffling shit into your deck is pretty bad, and this card is just ridiculously slow. Enchanted Cauldron is just too high variance. You can't really ever do anything reliably with this card. Sphere of Sapience is a card that the more I think about it, the less I like it. It's just like, it's a strong effect, but being down, like you have to pay a card for this effect, and then you still have to wait like probably 10 turns to get full value out of it. But it is an interesting enough card, and there are certainly some decks that are going to play, like be able to play this and still be alive 10 turns later, and decks that really need to dig for like specific things. I think somewhere this will probably sneak its way in. Lorekeeper Polkelt, another card that I was really high on this card initially, but my expectations for it have fallen off a bit just because I think it's you can't really just play this as soon as you draw it necessarily. But I'm still really interested in drawing Dino Tamer Brain on turn 7 every game. It's really strong with Galakron stuff, it's good in Quest Warlock, and just in general, it's good to like find your big stuff in mid-range or aggro decks. I think this has to see play somewhere. Headmaster Kel'Thuzad, I think this card is like pretty overrated. It's really situational. Like, it's situational because you have to have the spell, and it has to be like good. You have to have like the mana to play this, and it has to be good to take the minion. I just think I'd rather play something that's more independently strong than this, usually. Like, maybe it's the 30th card in a Highlander deck or something. It's the kind of card people probably play, even if it's not that good. But, I just don't love this card. Vectis, another card I don't love. I just don't think we currently have the death rattles to support this. I've seen it considered for, like, Face Hunter with Leper Gnomes and Kobold Sand Troopers, but man, that's a slow 5-drop in Face Hunter. And finally, we have Keymaster Alabaster. It's a big value idiot that takes some time to get value out of. I just don't see myself ever playing this card. And that was not too bad, about 35 minutes to get through all the cards. So my read on the meta is that Voracious Reader is fucking insane, and every deck is going to be attempting to play it. There's some other really strong aggro stuff in the meta too. So I think this is probably going to be an aggro meta, and if it's not an aggro meta, then Priest is going to shit on everything with Elucia.